absolute shock, I can tell you. I still feel the shock of it all. That a policeman could handle me like that.
Rodney returned to Jamaica in 1968, he met a deteriorating social situation. The economy was in enormous trouble. The Jamaica Labour Party, though it had won an election victory just the year previously, had in fact been in power since 1962. And its policies, its economic policies of industrialization by invitation, a policy of dependent capitalism, had proven a failure for the mass of the people. Unemployment stood in the region of 30%. Prices were rising. The housing situation was very bad. Utilities were not functioning properly. Bus fares were increasing rapidly. Generally speaking, there was a socially combustible situation just waiting for a spark to ignite it.
Every day, no more grinding, no more slaving. Yes, we want to be also behaving. That is why we have sense, give us independence.
When Jamaica became independent in 1964, and the motto was out of many one, but we did not see that way, as we were like the dregs of the society. And a couple of students and myself, Jerry, together we organized a demonstration the same night at the independence celebration, and Jamaica was celebrating the independence. We joined the float parade in the guise of being among the official float parade, and we entered the stadium with the parade. We eventually broke ranks and started marching through the stadium with placards and banners protesting the government treatment of the poor and the youths who were marginalized and had no future in the system.
It happened that the young people caught the vision of Rastafari, and they did at the time because there were a lot of answers, the questions that the society couldn't answer. The slow movement of an economy, the independence, but you don't feel the independence. Independence was in 62, but from what were we independent?
Bam bam, what a bam bam, bam bam, what a bam bam.
There was an incident take place in Carroll Garden, Mobile, with the Rasta man and the people. It was said that 6 Rasta men killed a man and burned down a gas station. The police force come in and kill 3 of the Rasta men, lock up 2, and 1 was at large. And they take 300 Rastaman in jail, put them in jail. And Sir Alexander Bustamante says, if the jail cannot hold them, throw them on Bogill. Bogill is a cemetery in Mobile. So that means it's to kill them.
Rudy come from jail cause Rudy get beer. Rudy come from jail cause Rudy get beer. You frame him yourself, things he didn't do. You rebuke him, you scorn him, you make him feel blue. Let him go, you got to let him go. I beg you, let him go. Let him go. Why you? Let him go. Come say why you? Let him go. You got to let him go. I beg you, let him
Emperor El Selassie, the conquering lion of Judah. Kings of kings and lords of lords. Reggae, Naya man.
Good evening. Dr. Martin Luther King, the apostle of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee.
We people too, we love the buzz with the bee. We stop living on our knees and start living on our feet. Cause brother, like it take two eyes to make a pair. We won't quit till we get our share. I'm talking about
The government alone cannot do everything for all the people at one and the same time.
This life let me wonder. This life let me wonder. How to live another day to come. This life let me wonder. This life let me wonder. How to live another day to come.
When you hear that Jamaica, independent Jamaica, has a black prime minister, you say, well, those people are in power. That's black power. But that's baloney. That is hogwash. That's a damn lie.
This life let me wonder. This life let me wonder. How to live another day to come. This life let me wonder. This life let me wonder. How to live another day to come.
Black power.
Coming up to the campus one day, I remember Peter Phillips and I think Michael Morgan told me, that there was this young history teacher who just come from Africa, who was very interested in the liberation struggle, and not only that, who had a lot of personal contacts in the liberation struggle in Africa, and who would like to help us in the work that we're doing. And we arranged, they arranged with me, to meet him. I don't remember if it was at a union. I think it was around by the history department one day. Peter came around here and met this man, Walter Rodney. I was struck, the smallness of his size and You know, the pleasantness and features are, you know, almost a kind of little boy look, you know, not looking really hard and tough and aloof.
Majority of people go about their lives, but there would have been a subset of people who were organizing, willing to reason, and there was therefore a network that would facilitate Rodney. So these networks existed, but he added value to the networks by virtue of his experience and his knowledge and his willingness to listen, which I think is his outstanding characteristic, the capacity to absorb and therefore to add value after the absorption has taken place to what was happening. So therefore there is a real dialogue.
He was not trying to start a revolution or take over the country or anything like that. To me, his mission was simply to educate people on Africa and where they're coming from, and also what they should do as a contribution to their country. That was Walter.
It is the capacity to engage with people. That was his outstanding thing. And therefore, when he made an intervention, it touched a nerve. Either you liked it or you were opposed to it. You have a debate, you have a discussion. So it's really not a mass fervor that I'm speaking about, but just networks of individuals and groups who were receptive to what Walter had to say.
The working people are in the greatest financial and economic strait because the burden of oppression is constantly shifted down onto the shoulders of the working people.
The primary thing for Walter was race consciousness. That's where it began. To be conscious of yourself as a black man. All arguments now about to organize yourself for economic power, all those things followed consciousness.
Young, gifted and black. Oh, what a lovely, precious dream. To be young, gifted and black. Open your heart to all.
A lecture he gave at the Union. He was trying to sensitize us to what it meant to be an African woman and a black woman. And I remember Walter saying, you know, I look around and all you look so beautiful. But when I look at your hair, all of your hair, I can't use the word straightened or whatever, but hit me to the core. I don't think I heard anything else that he said. But the idea that I was an imposter, the fact that I was not being or looking how I should, struck me to the core.
Gifted and black, your soul's intact. Young, gifted and black. You're watching this, you're chatting that. 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 Leave my business alone. Go vicious, contentious.
It's a scorcher. Don't you torture Dr. Walter Rodney. Reggae. To be black with ambition in Jamaica, it's a dangerous thing.
He went away on a lecture, and when he was coming back into Jamaica, he was stopped at the airport, and declared persona non grata by the Jamaican government. And when the student body heard about that, the Guild of Graduates, the Executive Council, of which Ralph Gonsalves was the president at that time, we decided that we were going to have a demonstration. The students decided that they would demonstrate against this.
I was president of the student body, president of the Guild of Undergraduates, and I immediately set about mobilizing the students. We got a meeting going in Mary C. Cole Hall about midnight. The entire student body turned up, and we took the decision that the next morning we are having a march in the city to the Prime Minister's office and the Minister of Home Affairs office to protest the exclusion of Rodney.
Then Neville Bramwell and myself mapped out a route and drove along what we imagined the route would be. Marching route.
The following morning, very early, students were advised to wear their gowns. That was proof that they were students.
If memory serves me right, this gathering took place near to the Undercroft. And there was a spillover from the Undercroft, right? Down the Queensway, made a right and head down Mona Road. So we walked down the Mona Road.
Yes.
I think the plan was to go and turn left on Old Hope Road. But by the time we had reached Wellington Drive, or before, that was the first encounter with the police. At Wellington Drive, the police came and literally said that, boy, you can't go further than this. This is an illegal march, right? And they were not in any way civil at all. I mean, it was a kind of brute force approach.
Well, all of this resulted in this body, because you had come up as a line, but everybody gathered, and we sort of got into force and gradually just put pressure on the line, and it gave way, of course, because we were coming, big swell from it, and we burst through the line and began to run out to the road, to get out on the road. We ran. I mean, I was ahead of a group. There was a group of us that, ran full speed because we figured that they would try to stop us.
The protesters took essentially two routes to the city. One which went down Crossroads area, and one which went down Halfway Tree area. On both routes, we met police. Though those who took the Halfway Tree route had the worst of the police brutality up to that point. Rodney's wife was on that route. A fellow from St. Kitts named Ribeiro. Jamaican student named Bunny Cunningham. They were tear gas. And in the case of Ribeiro and Cunningham, they were beaten with baton.
So at the confrontation of the police, I remember seeing, I wish I could talk to the man. I don't know who it is. But the policeman, me and this, raised his baton and down on my head. It never connected with my head. And to this day, I'll have to say, reiterate that, because nobody believed me afterwards. But there was a male student who I do not recall, beside me, who grabbed onto the policeman's hand. So to somebody looking on, it appeared as if police brutality. Yeah, but he never engaged my head.
The police were then just wheeling baton, because that Halfway Tree area is the area which, that including at that time the Prime Minister's residence. We held a meeting outside of McNeil headquarters. By then, the protest had swelled to several thousand. It wasn't just the 1,000+ students, but thousands of other youths, unemployed people, Rastafarians, the works. The police who was commanding the operations down at McNeil's ministry informed me when I set up the PA set that I would be arrested, that the riot act would be read, I'd be arrested, so that I must ask the crowd to disperse. A number of people spoke at that meeting. I spoke, the two vice presidents spoke, Rodney wife spoke, Norman Govan spoke. He was a lecturer at the university at the time. Having held that meeting there, we decided that we were going to move into the city further to carry the protest right into King Street itself, the heart of the city. But many of the students, particularly those from the Eastern Caribbean, were getting scared. The protest had in fact gotten larger than they had anticipated. They thought it was going to be a simple student protest, that you could go into Kingston, have a student protest in a fairly sanitized way, and walk back out of Kingston without anything happening.
And then all hell broke loose. People started running, throwing things. So we gathering up now to go back on campus. But of course we're going back up Duke Street, which was crazy. So we went right into the tear gas. All but the training flew out of my head. I don't remember water. I don't remember anything. I was so scared. I was frightened. And I couldn't even comfort or try to be a marshal to anybody. All of us were just so frightened. We just kind of grabbed each other and we just ran. We ran up Duke Street. We ran and ran and ran. Next thing I know, we were at campus. I'm serious.
And after that, students retreated to the campus, and a number of the youth who were involved in the march then got involved in various acts of, I think a number of buses were driven away, a number of shops were broken and so forth.
Those of us, we wanted to continue the agitation, particularly breaking the ring of the police and soldiers around the campus, and of course involved in the efforts to get the discussions on campus going about the future of the university and so on.
This is a society in which certain vested interests shut themselves in compartments of selfish complacency, but are quick to bitterly condemn those actions taken by the government in favor of the national interest.
So the period for the rest of October was unlike anything we had been through before in relationship to the way the Gleaner had demonized the students on the campus.
Thank you very much. We, as you are aware, we started a bit late, so we're going to move on to the first one of the sessions. So I'm invited everybody, all the members of the workshop and the person chairing the workshop to come over to the stage and take seats so we can begin.
Good morning. My name is Mark Figueroa. I'm the junior member of this panel. When we demonstrated in 1968, I was 16 years old. There are only 2 other students who I know could possibly be younger than me on the campus at the time. I'm going to introduce these folks in terms of how I knew them, but of course, among other things, this is nostalgia, so I have presented pictures of my friends as they appeared then. Unfortunately, in the bottom right corner, you'll see that Lynette missed the photo shoot, so she appears in the yearbook as also graduating. I'm also going to evoke the ethos of Walter Rodney. So that involves many things, not least among them is discipline, so that I have a timekeeper in the person of Suzanne Francis Brown, who will signal when you have 10 minutes left, 5 minutes left, 1 minute left, and when time is up, I'll come and take the microphone from you. In relation to the other aspect is that this morning I am Brother Mark, Brother Figueroa, or Mark. And except for Jerry, who will accept Bongo Jerry, it's brother and sister this morning, in keeping with how we used to talk in those days. We get a little officious these days. Of all my panelists, the first person who's going to speak, and is the one I've known the longest, is Horace Levy, who is now Deputy Chair of the Peace Management Initiative. The first 2 demonstrations I was involved with involved Horace, although he doesn't remember the first. Not surprisingly, the first demonstration was a peace demonstration that we had in Western Kingston. The second one was the 1968 one. At the time of the demonstration, he was a philosophy lecturer at the Mona campus. I'm not sure when Lynette is going to speak because Lynette is running a bit late. Lynette was at the time, I had her second, but we'll come back to Lynette. The second person I came to know was my friend, Jackie Vernon, as she was then. And all of these people are very formidable people. I came to know this tall, slightly intimidating, I would say, captain of the netball team and hall chair for Mary Seacole Hall at the time. But she turned out to be not such a intimidating person. And she went on to be a leader in education in Jamaica. The third person I will introduce, who is the one I came to know best, latest, but who I knew from '68, is Jerry Small, who at the time of 1968, despite his young age, was already a seasoned activist and continued to be an social activist to this day, and an observer and documenter of and commentator on the post-independence history of Jamaica. Jerry was a kind of screw-faced man, you know. You know, sometimes he never looked so pleasant. But as we got to know him, we realized that he was only screwing his face against oppression and wickedness, and is actually a very, you know, lovable person when you get to know him, you know, and a very loving person too. Lynette Vassell, who I hope will be here shortly, I believe she was a history graduate student at the time because she graduated in 1967, and, or 68 really. And Lynette, as we know, went on to be a leader in the women's movement, for which she continues to this day, and a pioneer in many regards in that sense. So I'm now going to hand you over first to Horace Levy, Brother Horace, as we know him, who will speak for 10 to 15 minutes. Thank you.
Oops, thank you. Hear me now? Yeah. Walter Rodney's quiet initiatives in Jamaica in 1968 affected a wide swathe of persons in varied ways. My personal rebellion against authoritarian rule also began to express itself, as it so happened, publicly in 1968 in two distinct spheres of my life. And what Walter, the Rodney protests, and my participation in it did was to really start me on one of those two spheres, that of social activism. Starting early in the decade, over the content of the 1962 Constitution and picking up inputs as the decade moved along, activism in the 60s, many of them what today we'd call activism of civil society. We didn't call it that then, but I'm pointing in that direction because of how I analyze what needs to be done in our society. Covered a broad range of things. I mean, there was the Rastafarians, the Young Socialist League, the Unemployed Workers' Council, the Jamaica Council for Human Rights, and the New World, and a lot of worker protests over and strikes, agitation over conditions and wages. In all that diversity, there was a common theme of a push against the authoritarian governmental rule and an assertion of the rights and cultural values of low-income classes, the down-pressed black majority. The authoritarian character was very real, and you older ones would know it very well, but let me repeat a couple of the things for those who are younger. It was the decade of the Coral Gardens assault on Rastafarians, the bulldozing of people's shanties in the Dongle, in Payne Land, and Olympic Gardens in 1963 and 1966 that made several thousand actually homeless, just simply drove them onto the streets. Legislation for the use of the cat-o'-nine and the tamarind switch for certain penalties for certain crimes. The banning of black books, the limiting of visas, the 1966 state of emergency, and Prime Minister Shearer instructing the security forces in regard to suspecting lawbreakers to take no measurements, read no beatitudes. In other words, shoot first, ask questions if you had any afterwards. Ironically, this was the same Shearer who, on October the 8th, 1962, before the General Assembly of the United Nations, when Jamaica was only 3 weeks a member of the UN, proposed the International Year of Human Rights. This is detailed in the book by Stephen Jensen, a Danish researcher, The Making of International Human Rights. It came out just 2 years ago. It was a proposal for an International Human Rights Year, which was held actually 6 years later in 1968. Through the outstanding diplomatic skills and determination of Jamaica's ambassador to the UN, Egerton Richardson. He faced opposition from the United States, initially from the UK, who switched after, though, to support him, so that Jamaica led the world on human rights for those 6 years, pursuing the goal the UN had agreed on as proposed by Hugh Shearer. Back home, of course, Shearer was cast in a different mold altogether, right? Mold formed decades before, of the authoritarian leadership of the two parties. Following national independence, this feature emerged very strongly, faced by security threats, by the Cuban Revolution in 1959, and the natural conservatism and authoritarianism of, in particular, the Jamaica Labour Party. It's less marked perhaps today, but authoritarian behavior is still brazenly evident in some of the decision-making of the present Prime Minister, especially on partisan issues. I was away from the activism of the early 60s, studying in Europe, and only returned in late December 1963, to begin teaching philosophy at St. Michael's Seminary, and from about 1967 at UWI, University of the West Indies. It is mainly, therefore, on my limited engagement, starting in 1968, that my few words here will focus. My involvement in the 60s activism began literally in 1968 by taking part in the protest banning Walter Rodney. I joined the march on Hope Road, having gone to keep a previously made and very important engagement for me on Hopefield Avenue. My background, as some of you older ones will know, was church clergy. I was a neophyte to left-wing activism, complete novice. Nevertheless, I found myself, because I was a lecturer at UWI, in front of the Gleaner office, don't ask me how I got there, on Harbour Street, with backed up by a huge crowd of people. Gleaner was located on Harbour Street at the time. When the decision was made by the lecturers leading the march, G. Beck in particular, George Beckford, not to proceed along Spanish Town Road, out of fear, I think, I don't know if it was openly expressed, my memory is not very strong, horrible memory, out of fear that it would provoke violence, because it was from there that the anti-Chinese riots had started just 3 years before. I was also present when the police launched their assault on the gathering of protesters on the east side of what is now National Heroes Park, right across from what is now the Ministry of Finance. George Beckford was just mounting a small box to address the gathering when the policemen charged. I remember grappling for a brief moment with a policeman before I came to my senses and wondered what I could be doing that thing. I flung him off and took to my heels, running like everybody else towards the west and southwest of the park. I had just seen the braking effect on the arm of a science lecturer. The bone of the arm was sticking out virtually at right angles to the man's arm. It was that charge by the police as people fled that started the attack on businesses on Orange Street and elsewhere by those who had joined, I think, the downtowners. I wouldn't have thought the students were the rioters as they've been described, but up until then it had been a completely peaceful march, a spontaneous eruption, really. March suggests a military and highly organized thing. There was organization, of course, but it was a very spontaneous eruption of protest against an unjust act. The police, of course, had tried more than once to block it, had not succeeded, but did succeed finally in breaking up the gathering, and that was what triggered what followed. The sequel, well, there was first of all the publication of the Abeng in early February the following year. I took part in some of the discussions on the direction, I think, but I was never, as far as I can recollect, on the actual committee, editorial committee. Nor can I remember writing anything substantive, or anything really, on the central issue that confronted the paper, which is the contest between the Rastafarian national black power theme and the socialist ideology promoted most of all by Trevor Monroe on class struggle and anti-imperialism. This contest was expressed over and over in the paper, 10 months period, and was never satisfactorily resolved, which is extremely ironic, considering that the newspaper came out of the protest over the banning of a man who saw no opposition between these two at all. Walter saw Jamaica as a black nation which would therefore determine and shape its politics, class structure, and anti-imperialism, not in a racist way that would exclude any or deny the rights of minorities. On the other hand, the Abeng did cross over into racism on a couple of occasions, more than one occasion. I was a complete neophyte to left-wing politics, and I was acutely aware of my ignorance. So I stuck pretty much to where I felt I could make a contribution, which ended up, I focused on carrying out the practical task of circulating the newspaper, urban areas and rural, as far as St. Elizabeth. One part of what went along with the Abeng, in which I was involved, both during its abbreviated lifespan and after its closure, was the reasonings with Rastafarianisms in communities. I was not part of the inner circle that went on to form the Workers' Party. In respect of those reasonings, being more or less oblivious to the reality that as a high-brown man, who many would have taken as white, I was nonetheless quite unrestrained, I have to confess, in my discussion with the Rastafarians. And I was probably arrogant about it too, I would have to admit, in spite of my awareness of my limitations. What some of us, certainly not all, but some of us, then thought, quite mistakenly, and this was a large part of our arrogance, was that the Rasta movement was the beginning of what would form the basis for a political party. I don't remember ever saying that explicitly, but that would have been the drift of some of our arguments. The profound cultural reality of Rasta, of its insight, development, and beliefs, had escaped some of us entirely, as we would later wake up to appreciate, some of us at least. Our thinking was too narrow, too political party-oriented, too close to the mindset of the people on the ground, of the Rastas in particular. It did not therefore understand the difference between a cultural formation and a political party, that they operated on different planes, even though they played highly complementary and mutual roles. As Abiko Gray has pointed out in his book on the period, Radicalism and Social Change in Jamaica, 1960 to 1972, the activism of the 1960s was too fragmented and diverse, too limited to the urban and even then to the small unemployed student and intelligentsia segments, to pose a rival to the two party union blocs. It would have been all the same, as he emphasizes, it would make a significant impact on their thinking and direction through the alternative vision that it offered. It opened up. This impact came about in large part, he maintains, as a result of the fact that it came to be championed by the People's National Party, which had some negative sides to it too. Another area to which the aftermath of the Rodney protests led was trade unionism, that of the Independent Trade Union Advisory Council, ITAC, and Chris Lawrence, its General Secretary. Chris was your old-time communist, though I wasn't passed personally in that position then. I worked closely with Chris. I developed huge respect for him. I played a part in the research, the organization, and the education efforts of the 6 small unions that formed that federation. All of this would lead to my departing from the university in 1973. Of course, I departed to an extent also from Rodney's example. I left because I found it difficult to combine the activism with academic teaching and research. I left UWI to join the Social Action Center enterprise of organizing field cooperatives, in worker-controlled cooperatives in Frome. I went there with my family to live in a working-class neighborhood for 3 years, and paradoxically, some of those black workers regarded me as an advocate of black power. I returned in 76 to Kingston journalism and other areas of social activity. All this began with joining the Walter Rodney protest in October 1968. Walter Rodney has shown us the power of the actions of a single, humble, caring civil society member through the reactions and inputs of many others to have immense impact on the course of the lives of many thousands of a whole nation and a whole region. The gap between the power-hungry political parties and a large segment of the population still exists. Authoritarian rule is only one manifestation, though a glaring one, of a political, economic, and societal structure that continues to deny justice and equality to all its citizens. And in my version, my belief, only a full development of civil society will create the structure that will help to reform those political parties and create the justice and equality that we all deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this mic on? Is the mic working? Thank you very much, Horace. And we now ask Jackie to continue. Jackie, thank you.
Good morning. I am so sorry that more students are not here because I'm a teacher and I would love to. Sorry. You want to hold it? I'm going to need my hands. Okay, sorry. I'm a teacher and therefore I would really like to create some more social activists. Who is an activist? Can't answer the question in that way. When I went to St. Hugh's at our 4th or 5th form prize giving, I don't remember which one, the princess somebody of somewhere was going to be the guest speaker and the handing out of prizes. I wasn't conscious of being black at that time. But I just knew I was not going to curtsy to this white woman. Don't ask me why, because I don't know and I cannot explain it. So I organized a minor protest of 2. It was a friend of mine, and I said, let me tell you what we're going to do. I was a netballer. We're going to wear knee bands, so we will not be able to bow. So we wore the knee bands, and we were not able to curtsy. That was just my little protest. As I say, I don't know where it came from, because at that time, I certainly was not conscious. At St. Hugh's, we had musical appreciation classes, yeah. And so every day we learned about correct music. One day in class, she was playing, I think, Ravel's Bolero. And you know what we know Ravel's Bolero? Na, 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 na. Oh, God. So I put up my hand. I said, Miss, can't you play some Betty King? Oh, my God. You don't do that at St. Hugh's. Saying at the time, Benny King would be like now saying to a teacher of English, could you play some Vibes Cartel for literature class? My punishment was that I had to stay back and listen to Ravel's Bolero. No, the interesting thing is, anywhere I am, as I hear, na 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 na, Ravel's Bolero. So the protest was not wasted, I don't think. When I came on campus, my first week could have been considered a protest. It wasn't really a protest. I don't like people to tell me what to do. So I had a hard time with ragging because the seniors were telling me what to do. And so they told, I reacted. So it was intense. I had to apologize to all the halls every other day for some, action. But I still wouldn't have considered myself an activist. I was from a middle-class family who supported the government, their JLP. So I was supposed to go on campus, get a degree, leave, get a work. What was happening in the society was not supposed to be my business. That's not how things went. I guess because I knew that's what I was supposed to do is why I went the other side. I was not going to do what I was supposed to do. When I reflect on what we did that day, I realize that an activist must have reasoning and intelligence. We decided, they banned Walter, we were going to march. We made all the plans, water for tear gas, sandwiches. It was chaotic. We remembered nothing. We were tear gassed. We ran. I don't think it occurred to any of us, and Ralph certainly didn't tell us, that if he had been declared persona non grata, we were actually agents working against the state. That didn't matter. We were defending our history lecturer, a calm, quiet man who had never tried to teach us anything subversive in his talks down the Union, because he never got to actually have a history class. So it was his talks down the Union that ignited me, particularly when he spoke about how we wore our hair. And it hit me, and from then, my hair has been natural to now, because what Walter said resonated to me, that as being a hypocrite, I wasn't being a real person. So Walter planted a seed which has grown into a consciousness of what it is to be black. And by black, I'm speaking not necessarily of color, but of the institutions that are oppressive of blacks. And it's not just blacks in the sense of as a black Jamaican. When I look at my country, and I protest silently now because I can hardly walk. The other day they were protesting the beaches down at Discovery Bay, and I wanted to go, but my son forbade me. But he planted in us a seed that whenever something is anti the people, you have to find a way to let the powers that be know that you're not accepting it. As I said, I'm sorry that the students are not here because they will have to carry on the mantle, because with my stick I can't do too much of the protesting apart from verbal, which nobody really reads, or it's a certain ilk of the society that actually reads. Because the letters to the editor and some of the commentaries, it's protests. But physical protest, which is dangerous, actually shows the powers that be that you are serious. I am serious enough that although I know I'm going to be beaten with a baton, I know I'm going to be tear gassed, I am still going, which means the thing that I am going about is important and I believe in it. And for that, I don't know how else one can allow Rodney's name to live on. But for us to be conscious of what is happening in our country and not to just sit on the veranda and say, I know not nar, me can't do not nar. It doesn't really affect me because it affects all of us. That's it. I have more time. I thought I saw something. No, okay. No, the other thing that I wanted to say about being a social activist is that there are times when things happen in the society and it bothers you, but you don't do anything. Because you think, one, maybe you say, well, I'm alone. No, it has to be that you must convince other people. The whole of Seacole didn't turn out. There were people in Seacole who kept telling me, I came here to study. My mother sent me here to study. One person who is my friend now, she attends my church, he actually said to me the night, you're creating all this noise in the hall and we can't get any quiet. So it's not, everybody on campus was not into the process. Everybody on campus did not believe that what we're doing was right. But there were enough of us. I heard a clip of Mr. Shearer on Sunday when I was listening to that program on RJR at 12 o'clock. And I laughed and I said, this is what governments do. Which plot? Which subversive element? What was Walter doing that the government felt that he was a disruptive agent to the point where they threw the whole army of the state against him? Walter wasn't doing any of that. And if he was doing any of that, it was necessary. Because as Horace Levy quite rightly said, what was happening in Jamaica at that time, the oppression that poor people were under, all Walter did was spoke, people listened, and people responded because they were actually feeling what was happening. So and then right after Shearer spoke, they had a clip of Mr. Siaga saying, how could people say that we are against black power? I was the one who brought Marcus Garvey's body home. Wow. They are not even teaching Garvey in schools. They have been talking for 500 years that, we need to teach Garvey in schools. And successive governments have been unable to introduce a simple curriculum. How much money will it take to introduce Garvey's opinions in school? But of course they can't, because it's dangerous. Because they don't want you to know, if you don't know, that you really are not free. They don't want you to understand where you came from. They don't want you to even link yourself to Africa. Look at the furor that it's still going on about Patois in school. People teaching Patois, people talking Patois. Patois identifies us. It is where, if you're in Russia, the steppes of Russia, and you hear a Jamaican saying something, immediately you're like, wow. And so we want to prevent us from being ourselves. We do not wish to be identified, one, as anybody, two, as people who came from Africa. What is so frightening about that? What is so horrible? The Chinese have taken over Africa now, so I don't even know if Africa exists. But if we do not understand who we are and where we came from, how do we proceed? This is the problem that I have, and this is what Walter awoke in me on campus. He made me stop to think who I was. And if you can affirm who you are, then it is possible for you to do many things. But if you don't know who you are, you're going to continue with this nonsense about, speak properly. We cannot teach Patois in school. Why is your hair like that? You know, the other day I started letting out my hair. It's still big. And a student in my class said to me, I'm teaching part-time some students from church, Miss, why your afro so big? I say, so people can see it. She said, yes, miss, but you don't think it's too high? I said, no, because I find that when I wear it big, I frighten people. No, it's true. When I go anywhere, I go to board meetings and my hair is out, and people are always patting it in. Not patting it neat, they're patting it in, as if the size of it reminds them of Angela Davis, which is fine. I have no problems with that. But you know, it's as if we as a people are frightened of looking in the mirror. How can we, even at this stage, change people to look at yourself as how you are, look at yourself in the country, look at the country, and feel a sense of belonging, so that when something goes wrong, a protest, a public protest, is not seen as a great, what's the word I want? Something illegal. It is just persons in a group expressing their opinions, which they would express on the veranda. But because of the physical show of force, because the protest in Discovery Bay the other day wasn't very large, you know. But it got the attention of the media, and it got the attention of the persons. So when we sit and we think, it don't make no sense, or police going tear gas me, police going liquid in my head, them lick me in my head, and they probably licked out my senses rather than licked it in, but I'm still here. And the tear gas was terrible when it was happening, but I remember the tear gas now. You know, so why don't we all kind of start a protest group going about the things that are wrong. Students, what is wrong on campus? What can you do to protest so that you can change what is wrong? Thank you.
Thank you. You can see why I was intimidated when I met Jackie. Okay, we're going to ask Sister Lynette to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Mark. Panelists, brothers and sisters, good morning. Apologies for being late, but we don't want to waste time to talk about the trials of a Friday morning. When I spoke to Barry Hickman last night, when we communicated, he reminded me that what they say is that each time we remember something, we don't actually remember the thing or event itself, but simply the previous memory we had of it. So we have an error of accumulating errors about our memory. What he was sure about, though, that we shared, was that we first heard that Walter had been banned at the Students' Union, where there was a meeting of the History Club, which is where we first met. And the History Club was a vibrant, very progressive space in my day. And he remembers that Douglas Hall, who was head of department, announced that and called off the meeting. And he remembers that Douglas Hall was very supportive, was more supportive than others of the colleagues in the department at that time. He mentioned names than, for example, Woodville Marshall, for example, because after 50 years, it's time to call names. So the history department was a very pivotal space because that is where Walter had been. And so we felt very connected in a sense to what was happening. And although, like Jackie said, I had my encounters more in terms of the meetings that he had at the Student Union. Then I got another mail this morning from Decima Williams, because today is an important day, and she said, we remember not to forget. We are still inspired by the positive record of the revolution. We mourn and condemn the violent death of our comrades and our revolution. Long live the power of people, long live peace, long live justice, and long live love. Today and every day, may all our relationships be healthy, and we commit to always go forward ever. She never said backward never, just forward ever. And so in reflecting on this process, this encounter that we'd have here this morning, I've been trying to more put meanings to my memories rather than count on the exact memory. I remember, for example, and I've shared this here before, I remember the Sunday afternoon that the taxi dropped me with my Dulcimina. It was kind of bigger than a Dulcimina at Mary Seacole Hall when I was first coming on the campus. And I remember when I went into C7, which is on the down floor, and realized that for the first time I would have a bed to myself, a single bed and space for myself, how I kneeled and prayed and thanked God that I had been able to have this experience, knowing where I was coming from. I also remembered that my mother had always told me not to forget where I'm coming from. And I think that message that my mother gave me was, for me, the memory of what Walter said and symbolized for me, because he spoke a lot about the sacrifices that the working people and Jamaicans make for us to come to the university, and how often many of us forget where we are coming from and turn our backs against the people and against our very parents. And I remember my mother used to be very vexed about children who did not have any manners to their parents after they had sacrificed so much for them. And so hearing Walter kept me connected with my mother and who she represented. I also, so for me, remembering 50 years ago is a memory about choices, the choices that we make as to who we will stand with and what we will stand for. I remember the march. I remember in particular George V Memorial Park and running frantically around and confronting barbed wire, because I think there was a lot of confusion. But what was important for me, as I recollect, is that we were in our red gowns, which was a signifier of privilege, but and people really recognized that, university students, but that we were moving out from this space that creates privilege, and we were standing with the interests of the majority of the people. And for me, that is the meaning of activism that I have held for myself. The choices that I make to have an explicit bias towards the poor, to not to betray who my mother is and has been and where I come from. I just want to see how important spaces like the History Club was for people like me, because we met a lot of our own kind, and we enjoyed history. History was really giving us a sense of our identity and connecting the dots of our experiences as colonials and anti-colonials, and understanding ourselves as black people in that tradition. Although I did not myself do African history, Caribbean history kind of gave us a rootedness that was very important. But as I remember, because I'm talking about the meanings of my memories, I later understood much more clearly how the Walter Rodney experience was an important bridge between what had happened before and women in particular and what would come after. Because the 1960s, because we're talking about activism in the 1960s, and I was thinking whether we have a word called reactivism. In the 70s, we talk about reactionary forces, Horace, and we must have a word that is the counterpoint of activism, which has a progressive content. But in the 1960s, the bridge of the 1968 period linked with a time in Jamaica's earlier history when women, for example, were forming their organizations and had a long history of struggling for identity in their organizations. And one organization, for example, the Jamaica Federation of Women, which is very noted, which was formed in 1944 by Lady Huggins, was a pro-colonial organization. It was really two Jamaicas finding themselves in that one organization, because a majority, it was one of the earlier mass women's organizations. A lot of women, black women from the rural areas, were crowding into it and learning to sew and learning important skills. And then you had the white elite leadership that signified under Lady Huggins and all her companions who would gather at King's House, and you'd have, it was like two Jamaicas in one organization. And then by the 1962, 59 to 62, you have another element, a middle class element, working to assert itself as a nationalist group. It is rooted in work that had been done in the 1930s, like with people like Amy Bailey and Mary's Morris Nib and the Women's Liberal Club. But in the 1950s and approaching independence, you see a struggle happening also of middle-class Jamaican black women trying to assert themselves. And that tradition would link with the later traditions of struggle that we saw blossom in the 1970s, for example. And I just looked very quickly at something that's in my thesis, because a section of the Jamaican white women's movement did not really want independence. They didn't favor the fact that they were going to be ruled, so-called, by as they said. Well, let me read what the editor said of the Gleaner. That there's a section of persons, mostly women, who, quote, resent the fact that the masses of Jamaica now participate healthily and vigorously in the government of Jamaica. Some of the older ones wish to return to the days of running Jamaica by indirect rule from King's House parties of those days, or the influence of the feudal overlord. People in business are loyal, solid, good Jamaicans, but they are badgered by the well-heeled malcontents with whom they often meet in the evenings, people with little soul, no courage, scant gratitude to the country that has made them. And late Judith de Cordova was a leader of that kind of pack of persons who were not satisfied with the direction that Jamaica was becoming. And I just want to go to people like Una Mason, who spoke about the fact that she disagreed with those persons who are expressing disagreement with the direction of the country, and she said, with all due respect to Mrs. Judith de Cordova, it must be said now that such a statement is a tacit admission that the women of Jamaica lack courage and are afraid to face up to a very real challenge. The women of Jamaica cannot sit idly by, and this is what I wanted to sing. The women of Jamaica cannot sit idly by and wait till they are assured of the good behavior of all citizens before they join the crusade for the making of a better Jamaica. They must join in now, and by their integrity and sincerity overcome evil with good. Now is the time for all brave women to come to the aid of the country. I raise that to say that when we talk about activism of the Walter 1960s into the 1970s, that there's always tension and struggle, especially in this anti-colonial period, when people in this period after independence, what is generally still anti-colonial, anti-neo-colonial, but people have to make choices as to where they would stand. People like Una Mason stood up for a more open and liberal and progressive Jamaica that she could stand with. And when it comes to a point in the 1970s, for example, that is exactly what shows itself in the activism of women such as myself, who got involved in the political movement under the WPJ. So the fact is that recollection, memory, activism in terms of memory, the memory of activism has many lessons, one of which is that one makes choices. I think we even make choices about what we remember, in fact. But we make choice, it helps our experiences help show the choices that we make if we are going to stand for the status quo, or if we are going to go against the grain and have an experience and a connection that challenges the system on behalf of the majority of the people. Finally, to say that it is a struggle that still continues. Although women were concerned, some women were trying to push some influence in independence. It is only in 2011 that the Jamaica Constitution granted to women the right not to be discriminated on the basis of sex. Up to 2011, the Constitution says you cannot be discriminated on the color or creed, but it did not say sex. And that struggle for women's equal citizenship, which was not a pronounced part of the thing of the 1960s is still a big part of what we're aiming for today. And yes, a lot of women did take part in the marches, Jackie, right? We had a very significant participation by women. Thank you very much.
Jerry. You want me to say, everybody know by now how the majority of our people reach here, so I don't have to go back through that. What I want to deal with a solution them to the majority of our people them problem. And it is the same problem that the most of the people in the world have. All human beings have the same rights. And one of the main rights that was left out, deliberately left out in 1945 or 48, I mean the Human Rights Charter. Deliberately left out of the Human Rights Charter is the right of every human being to land, right to a living space. And deliberately leave out that. Because every human being have land and right to a living space, you don't have cheap labor. You can't force cheap labor upon people. They deliberately left out that. And then now, when you hear Jackie, Vernon, as I know, are talk about the protests down in a Discovery Bay, where they take with the whole of the beach and everything all around the island, they must sell it out. It's land. Although it is seaside, it's land. You have rights to land and you have rights to freedom of movement. That means you have to have access to the sea also. Anyway, the thing is that as Rastafari, me and Rasta, we always push and remind the people that we have the right to land. And we will capture land. And we capture land. That is what Rasta famous about. We capture land. My virgin yesterday was, giving some reason about interrelating with Rasta and so on. Him say, I think that I'm not so sure if it's fully accurate that Rasta don't believe in the ownership of land. Well, we believe in the collective ownership of land, yes. And then now some of the land should be allocated to families also, but just for hold for the time being. So now, we capture land, and the first piece of land I capture is a cave. And I do want to give credit there night when I screwed up on the same panel. When I live in the cave, a month later, even my baby mother, who is at the time when she found out she was 7 months pregnant, and she come to the cave with me. But when Scree find out, or him find out, him say, "Hold a red spot for me, a rat bat, a rat bat a pest them in the cave at night time. Arnold Bertram give me a sleeping bag. And him also give me, you saw him move out of the cave and go get civilized and go live in a house. He give me a fridge, first fridge me ever want. You don't even know that. Anyway, but it's land, I'm telling you about land. And through that now, then after that, we capture a piece of land on the riverside. It's not about me now, only a choice of implementing a thing. We capture land, and we capture crown land first. Crown land first we capture. Anyway, I want to talk about the great example of China and Cuba. China and Cuba, after Russia, carry out the most remarkable Marxist, communist revolution in the world. And along the way now, Marxism is a liberation strategy and tactic. It's not an economic. It's a liberation thing now. For fight for free yourself. You say once you're free, Marxism is not a prosperity building thing. So Cuba and China, Russia know that, And Cuba and China find out, say, well, we have to go build prosperity. We use Marxism and we liberate ourselves. It's great. Me as a Rastafari, we always admire the Marxists, and the Marxists admire something about Rasta. One thing about Rastafari is not a religion, and in the early days coming up to my time, most of the elders them try and impose religion upon the thing, and through that most Rasta afraid of political action. But some Rasta not afraid of political action. Man like Sam Brown from way back, come right up through me and many others. We're not afraid of political action. But most of them, the religion, same like what your Marx say, is the open to the people. The religious part of Rasta come and worship Selassie. Selassie not require no worship. Jesus Christ never require no worship, neither. It's a little clique of people establish the religion after the Jesus gone and make a money off it and make a living. But religion have its place, But Jesus Christ never require no worship. Neither Selassie, neither Walter Rodney. Anyway, long story short, China and Cuba, great examples that after them use the Marxist, apparatus and free themselves, See the Cuba, Castro, same Castro, come from a very rich family, most people don't know. China, it wasn't the communist Chinese government, it wasn't the Communist Party that bring about this great economic strength what China have now. It's some of the small farmer them start revolt against some of the centralist ideas them and determined to market them food and thing and do something. And it's then after Mao gone and things, certain things start to change around. It wasn't the party changed it. So anyway, when the Marxists now start to make contact with the Rastafari in Jamaica, primarily through people like Walter Rodney, because Marxists didn't contact with Rasta before, you know. A whole lot of people, like George Myers and Ben Man around them and there. But when Walter Rodney come now, him start set examples of other Marxists, say, yes, we have to deal with the Rastafari and regardless of religion. We're not talking about them religion, you understand? But there was a temptation. So after Walter gone and them start to bang and all this way, there's a temptation to outflank certain thing about the people we are making alliance with. Temptation to outflank them, you know. And you get, you know, you make alliance with the popular forces, and then we reach a stage where the revolution are going to triumph now. You jettison the popular forces and you implement your Marxism. Them get them teaching from abroad now. But you understand? So the temptation is to outflank and outmaneuver. But I want to say in short, a Rastafari break down the social barrier in Jamaica. Marxism have the ideal of doing it tonight, the PNP have the aim. But a Rastafari, everybody knows say, a Rastafari break down the social barrier and kick it to it. Because you know, say Rastafari start spread even before His Majesty come here. But worse after the Emperor come here. Start spread through the so-called upper income picnic. I don't know when now, 60s. Herman Woody King, from in the 40s, them are Rasta youth. Them people, them are big society black people. Madam Mia Kingston. Sterrett from up at Tavern there. No, I know him. Sterro. And 1942, Sterro go Excelsior. So you have Rasta youth in high school from them times. So that's why I push it when people start boosting up, you know, in the 60s and later. Oh, you're the first Rasta youth from, I go to middle class and go high school. Long before we. That I go on. But the fact is that Rastafari break down the social barrier in Jamaica and kick it away. Whether it's through Herman Woody King, the invasion of the high school by a Rasta youth. I mean, I talk about the religion, I talk about the freedom movement that is Rastafari, not no religion. And after that, Bob Marley and many generations after that, broke down the social barrier, grab a Cindy Breakspear, and not go on like him and bow down to her, she was a white man or a society man. Broke down social barrier. The Marxists have the same way, we cannot lie, we must have make an alliance. But don't try it. Nobody not superior. May I remind Rasta Virgin for a long time. We are not superior to the rest of the people. But it's the tendency, it's a human tendency in every group from your move nice to feel like you're superior to the rest of the people. That is not so. And you must resist the temptation. Anyway, long story short now. There's no such thing as Rastafari rights. A lot of people all feel like, you know, them group have certain special rights. There's no such thing as Rastafari rights. But the politician will tempt you. Right now the politician use ganja and tempt Rasta. One side I try to draw a Rasta on film side. Even though for a long time most Rasta more defend PNP than JLP. I give Rasta certain rights. Okay, Rastafari, sacramental rights. And the Rasta can have a certain amount of ganja called it sacrament and all that. Move and go with that. A temptation, a bribery. There's no such thing as Rastafari rights. You have human rights applied to everybody. There's no such thing as black supremacy. You have to lick with that. Because some original talk about black supremacy. Move with that, man. From your little youth, have a lick with that. Foolishness. Idiot argument. You can't go tell Haile Selassie about no black supremacy. But yet, no for our virgin. It sounds nice, you know. But anyway, the thing is that there's no such thing as Rastafari rights as such. There's no such thing as black rights. There's no such thing as this right. There's no such thing as gay rights. It sounds nice, but it's human rights. You have a right to go at Abe, Alpha my radio program. You know much people not like when I say, you cannot eradicate homosexuality out of humanity. That go on long before you're born. You cannot eradicate it. You don't waste the time on that. Yet people all phone in and man all start phoning and say, oh, Jerry, go you're a bad man, you're homosexual. At the same time, somebody homosexual say, Jerry, I fight against gay. I don't fight against none. I say, everybody have rights. I don't want nobody come dominate me though. And I will not participate in trying to dominate, Rasta dominate over the rest of people neither. You don't understand me? So anyway, the alliance of the progressive forces, that must still go on. Because the fight, we have fight from before 68, you know. Long before 68, we start kick up Rasta and a protest, you know. From where 11, 12, not far away. You know, understand? It's not a personal thing. But the alliance of the progressive people must continue, because it's not finished yet. So we have to reach a stage where China reach, we free them country, and then we turn it around now and start to employ some of the methods of capitalism, but not the spirit of capitalism. Even Cuba, start to allow certain things that is technically capitalist and so on, but are under control, and it still not work out perfectly now. Neither capitalism nor communism. Capitalism not good, but they have a perfect way to make money for themselves. Communism not perfect, none of them not perfect. But you know, so it is probably left to we, the African people in the Caribbean, or all of the people in the Caribbean, to work out even a more perfect thing, but it's a common thing. But the alliance of these progressive boards must continue. And I advise my brethren and sisters and say, last year, Walter Rodney conference, I heard them talking about the regendering of Marcus Garvey and the regendering of Walter Rodney, because, you know, them really wasn't that up to date with feminism, and them wasn't that up to date with gay rights and things. But at the same time, nobody make it antagonize one another. Don't make the gay rights people them come antagonize the rest of the thing. Like how Marxists and Rasta did antagonize one another in the 60s. Make it just level and work together, and nobody make none of the group be dominant or demand say, boy, if you not put gay rights on your agenda, you know, we not defend black struggle. Make it nobody with that, man. Make it just go forward. I mean, I done before them tell me for done, you know?
Jerry, that is precious. Very nice.
Well, we've had a very Rodney-like panel here this morning, and persons who wish to now join the discussion, you could line up behind the microphones, please. You stand behind the microphones. There's one here and there's one there, and I will take a few questions or comments.
Yes, thank you.
Congrats in this seminar being put on. Well done, UWI Mona.
Could you just introduce yourself, sir? Sorry.
George Lopez, a permanent friend of UWI Mona.
Prominent or permanent?
Pimanent in language in English. A comment on Jackie Vernon's comment about the low turnout of students on campus to this conference. It has been the norm, madam. If you want this place to be filled up, you have to attract mature students like me to fill up this place. The younger ones are not coming forward for all sorts of reasons. We don't need a PhD research to say why. I know some of the reasons, but it's UWI Mona has to do something about it. But there are solutions. We have to go search for the solution with honesty, with truth, and we'll find it and experiment with it. And once you get it right, then work with it. My good friend, Professor Bongo Jerry, good comment. I would like to talk to you after the seminar to see how I could work with you closer, as well as to find funding to lubricate and grease what you want to get done.
No palm nor grease though.
Lady Lynette Vassell, congrats on your women's activism in an era of Kingston that I'm familiar with. I've spoken to the working class women there from time to time. How is Lynette doing? How much can Lynette provide to the programs? And they all tell me what is what, because they have no reason to tell me other than their own discovery and how effective Lynette is. So the other inputs for this conference, I prefer to do it in writing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carolyn Cooper. This is for you, Jackie. I just wanted to say don't despair because they don't see so many students here. One of the issues is that this kind of forum, as George just said, is not the space that students gravitate towards. And we have to recognize that popular culture is the way through which they will engage with these issues. And you talked about Cartel being, the fact is that despite all of what Cartel has done, his music does speak to young people. He has very good political lyrics that sometimes get lost in all of the slackness. And you have the Kabaka Pyramids, the Proteges, Damien Jr. These people are also speaking about some of the issues of social protest that we would like to hear the students engage with us on in this kind of forum. But they're not going to come here. It's just, unless your teacher says you're coming here instead of being in class. I think, Ajamu, we have brought your class. That is how it's going to happen. But if you have a big public forum on a popular culture issue that can be tied in to these issues, the students will come. I will never forget when I invited Cartel to come to speak at the campus, over 5,000 people came. And as one of my colleagues said, in all the years he had been teaching at UWI, that was the first time his child asked if she could come to anything at the university. So we need to understand the dynamics of the context in which the students are going to engage.
I could hear me. My name is Karine, and I just wanted to make a comment on what that very wonderful lady said about the fact that Garveyism is not being taught in the schools and why it won't be taught. I think Garveyism is anathema to a society like Jamaica that maintains its pigmentocracy, and that's a word Jamaicans never use, and it's colorism, because they would both bump heads. And I don't know if you want to comment on that. It's a very simple reason, because that's the reality we have.
We can comment afterwards. Go ahead.
On the question of students...
I know you're well known, sir, but...
No, I'm not well known.
Would you introduce yourself?
Ajamu Nangwaya. On the question of getting students out and generating interest around issues like this, we have to organize them around their own interests. There are a lot of things here that are not in the best interests of students. And they're also fearful. They're fearful, for example, if you have an exam, final exam worth 70%, most students disagree with it. And I'm saying, but you can change that. Get your guild, that's your political body, go inside there and organize. And if the current leadership doesn't deal with the issues that you want, you get rid of them. We need, on this campus, there are not enough student clubs, political clubs. That's what I'm used to on campuses abroad, where I thought activism wasn't strong enough abroad on campus, but here, it's almost non-existent. It's only the academic clubs you have, history club and other things. But where are the students organized around police violence, around women's rights, queer rights on campus, the rights of the working class? Very little, or even the environment. So we have steps that we must take. And I believe that even the lecturers, we need to do more in using our classroom space to politicize and conscientize students. I don't believe we're doing it. We are not using our classrooms sufficiently to raise students' consciousness, to link issues that they're experiencing in their community through the lessons that we're teaching. Because that's the space that we may be able to engage them. And as Carolyn was talking about Vibes Cartel, I'm fire bunny. But my students recognize the social justice lyrics that he promotes and engage me even when I'm saying, yeah, he's a promoter of capitalism and he's a charlatan and an opportunist. They're engaging. They don't just accept my position. That's what we want. We have to use it, the classroom, much more. But what's fundamental, and we're talking about organizing, if we're organizing, we must be in organizations. And that is something that we have kind of shifted away from. We have concerns, but we express it online and, what we call slacktivism. But we must be in face-to-face organization, and we must organize programs. We must organize projects and institutions so that we're carrying out our struggle on a day-to-day basis. And it's not just merely protest, which you go out and then you go back home and sit back. So we have a lot of preliminary work to do to get students out here.
Hold on a second. Go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Claremont Curtin, a Caribbean citizen, accidentally born in Guyana and living since the 29th of September 1967 in Jamaica. I've also lived in Grenada and was involved in assisting with the Grenada Revolution, for which I am not ashamed at all, as some of my colleagues are. I wish to raise one question. Some of you who were alive and remember at the time, Hugh Lawson Shearer said, and I quote, "Only the president, only the treasurer of a non-financial organization is a Jamaican." Clearly to divide not only students, but also the population. I would like comments on the, by the panelists about the extent to which, in the context of modern-day Caribbean, the issues related to national divisions are still impacting us. We see, for example, CARICOM, we cannot go forward. There are a lot of divisions across our region. Happily for me, I have never been rejected in this country. People always ask me which school I went to and so on. But I went to Queen's College, by the way, and I'm not into QC tribalism, as some people are. But I want the panelists to comment on this statement by Shearer and what has been the impact, if any of it, in Jamaica and across the region. And by the way, there are many, many non-Jamaicans participating in the protest march. I'm concerned that in the exhibition, I'm the only one non-Jamaican identified as a Guyanese, and I've raised the issue with the organizers of the exhibition, that they put me up there as a Guyanese, and I've been living in Jamaica since the 29th of September, 1967. So in a sense, I'm not really a Guyanese. Again, okay?
Thank you.
And let me congratulate both. The two dangerous passports in the Caribbean, though. When you arrive with any one of them in any countries in the region, for example, Barbados, you're always thought of as a difficult person.
Thank you. All right. You have a comment coming up here? Go ahead.
I'm asking the panel for comment on Shearer.
I don't know if
Yes, I'm running the show, you know.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I wanted to comment on some of the comments I heard, and perhaps the presentations. And I'm Nadine Spence. I would have been warden in the tradition then, warden of Seacole, now Student Services and Development Manager. Some time ago, Knife, I think, made a comment that the only times in his connection with UWI that he's seen authentic student action is when the guild is led by a non-Jamaican. I think that idea of who Jamaicans are and the issue that Dr. Curtin just raised.
Brother Claremont.
Brother Claremont just raised about the nationalisms that were at play at the time in 1968 is perhaps something that is instructive that we could comment on. You know, the nature of the guild in the moments over the time when it is led by non-Jamaicans. I don't know if that is a factor that played into what happened in 1968 as the guild was led by Gonzales. But certainly there's a feeling now that the presence of the two parties on campus has kind of stifled the imagination of the students and the guild, such that it's only when the leadership is not invested in any of the political parties that you might certainly see students being active. I think the other thing that we might not be aware of is the fact that hall life has changed tremendously, and that the campus has not been a residential campus for a very long time, and that most of the students travel onto the campus in the daytime. and are concerned about some different things. I think as well, one of the things I discovered some time ago, and I know I heard talk about the neoliberal realities that have changed the nature of campus life. It's now 2 semesters. Students have exams almost year-round. As we speak now, students are engaged in heavy exams, mid-semester exams that have taken on more importance now than they had some 5-10 years ago. Every course has a mid-semester exam that students have to sit and study intensely for. And that if you step onto campus in September and immediately you start preparing for exams in October, and then right after exams in October, you have to start preparing for exams in December, you don't have time to engage in the kinds of activities that one would see as activist work or social justice work. I think as well that when you have faculties where the cost of tuition is 10,000 US, quoted exactly like that, and parents are having to sell their houses and their dreams, well, perhaps not their dreams, but to sell their futures, to get their children to do certain kinds of degrees, whether law, engineering, or whatever it is, the medical faculty, for example. It changes the dynamics. How are students going to be active when they have to be concerned about the consequence of failure? I don't know if the students in the 1960s were as pressed with those matters. I think the other thing too is the nature, I spoke to the nature of hall life. I don't know if we recognize what has been happening with the building of new halls on campus that are privatized and that really doesn't ask for students to be anything other than pay their monthly rent, and where the students have been left on their own. As a matter of fact, I don't know if people have been aware of the fact that over the last 5 years, the students who went home in May were asked to pay fees for a full year, even though they were going home. So the levels of injustice, even on the campus, I find, and the preoccupation with exams and testing, and the fact that I think we have an idea in our head that the students who come to campus, most of them are really these sophisticated millennials who have been introduced to technology, and all of them have a computer and Wi-Fi at home, and they don't. And that is one of the reasons why we are so not getting the identity of this generation of young people. Most of the people who come from communities that I came from don't have no internet or no telephone. And one of the things that UWI does is it sends them acceptance letters online. If you are from where I am, you have to take a bus, drive 19 miles to Black River to get access to the internet to see if you got accepted to UWI. And so there's this lack of appreciation, I think, for the ways in which people are living in Jamaica and the ways in which students come to campus. There's a whole set of students on campus who are homeless, who sleep in the library and move their suitcases around from place to place. So I think even as we are contemplating, where have these activists gone, we have to recognize that the realities that our students are faced with are so very different. So very different. If you told me that Walter Rodney lived in Chancellor Hall, 1968, or when he was a student, and the Chancellor now, I would tell you, I can't imagine that. The nature of the places are so very different. So I'm just saying that. My time is up, even though I never.
This is our last question, and then we go to the panel.
Okay, Nadine made some very good points.
And
there.
who you are, Miss?
Christine Cummings, Guyanese Jamaican, who's accused of being Trinidadian for liking Lara, which speaks to how we operate. You can't like somebody from another territory if you're not from that territory. I wanted to speak a little about the issue of here. And because I was in a classroom with a lot of young people for so many years, and because I try to understand where they're at, I would ask them about, well, what's it with all this weave and blah, blah, blah. And some of the responses were mind-blowing. I'll never forget one young lady looking at me and said, let me tell you something, miss. You see all them pretty girls, them who flash them here and win Miss Jamaica year after year? I can buy that and win. I just want you to understand, they don't think the way we think. They want to win the money, the car, and pay their school fees. And if putting on the weave is going to give them access to the money, or progressive views and natural hair, be damned. I am just delighted when I see someone with natural hair who wants to be natural. But there are all sorts of dynamics at work. They have been socialized to hate themselves. And they have been ostracized by not fitting in. So they just take the whole society is capitalist, them want them bimmer, and they're going to do what is required to get it. That's my comment.
Thank you. I'll now ask the panelists to comment on any of the issues that were raised that they want to speak about in terms of, yes?
I want to comment.
Go ahead, Jack.
I want to comment on the, what was it, Jamaican-ness or the lack of Caribbean-ness. When I came on campus, like a lot of Jamaicans, particularly after that ridiculous referendum when we pulled out of CARICOM, the idea that Jamaica was the star and these small islands, that was what was in my head when I came on campus. By the end of the first week, I was a Caribbean person. All my friends that I limed with were St. Lucians, Guyanese, Trinidadians, and I became a Caribbean person. When I teach, I always try to tell my students, if any issue come up and they start with any foolishness like, oh, Trinidadians are, I stop them. But again, like everything else, it's a process and an education, because we have the tapes in our heads which say the same nonsense, that, you know, Guyanese are this and Trinidadians are this, and we're superior because we this and with that. But if we don't constantly teach it, we don't constantly remind people, we're Caribbean people. All of we look alike, all of we do the same things, all of we like the same thing. We eat the same food with little variations, but we're not any different. But as I say, I don't know about the rest of the Caribbean, but I know Jamaicans have this and were brainwashed into thinking about this idea of their superiority. It doesn't exist in the minds of sensible, intelligent Jamaicans who did not vote for federation. And that is where it all started. But I guess you get the governments you vote for.
Other comments on any specific questions that were asked? Lynette?
No, in relation to that question that Chairman asked, I don't know if I would call them national divisions per se, because the differences as nation states are clearly there. I think that what the problem has to do with the nature of our leadership and the perspectives that we have about our vision of development for our people in our own space and broader. Because, you know, I do not think that at the level of the popular masses and general people, we have that sense of that great division so much as our leaders each competing for small gains that they can get from external forces, and everyone wanting to be king in his and her, but mainly his space. So I think that is where the issue is. And if we could have the kind of leadership who had a broader understanding of what human beings need and a people-centered development approach, then all the foolishness that we see persisting would really, you know, we could do something about our collective development.
A last word,
Yeah.
Jerry.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, the politician, them, they are not my leadership, and I don't know if them is your leaders, and it's not my leaders. these people have been imposed, and then become more and more distant from the people. And all of them are minority government. But the Caribbean people get to know one another and get to link up through cricket and migration and Higla traveling to the Caribbean and Rastafari and the music and all them things. The people them link up, share as usual, like many other people, was just trying to conquer the situation by dividing from one another. And because of that threat, the next president of the guild, I think, was Pickersgill, not true? Next one was Pickersgill.
Tony Pickersgill.
Yeah. I don't say him never have the popularity to win, but it was definitely an anti-Caribbean outside of Jamaica election or political climate during the guild elections after that. And then when it was, the guild and the guild, especially the EAC, External Affairs Commission, and those other things, was strengthening them links in the community, especially Augustown. Shearer and them start put up some resistance, and Pickersgill meet with them, Tony Pickersgill. And when Pickersgill said how much the good work with them do Augustown and then place, Shearer tell him, say, Pickersgill tell me now. So the only thing him can hear from Augustown is Jerry Small. I lie I tell you now. But him I try to show them, say, him know Augustown and the university are link up because him knows the Augustown people surround the campus. And whole heap of Rasta, the Augustown and Bedward people and all of the black militant people. Because when they send police to go lock up Bedward, they just send the deputy commissioner to go lock up Bedward. And Bedward detain him down the 3 days. So from a long time they know that Augustown is next to like the Maroon situation where it's autonomy. And that's why they never like Pinnacle and that place. They never like no commune because they know the next thing is that what? You can't come in there without permission and so on and so forth. So it's just some brain and most usual.
Horace?
No, to Claremont, I only wanted to agree with Lynette. And I don't think the divisions are critical at all. I wanted to pose a counter question to Nadine. Where is she there? You painted a dread picture of the situation for students. I wanted to ask you, what is the way forward for them and how to, are you in agreement with Carolyn saying that the only way to involve them is to, reach out through their popular culture? Or what else would you suggest?
Okay.
I'm putting you on the spot, but I mean, I have no solution. And you've depicted something which is quite quite difficult.
No, and we are going to close this session in 2 minutes' time because we have been given an extension. And we're to come back at 1 o'clock, is that it? Have I got that right? At 1 o'clock. So Nadine, try to be as brief as possible.
Try. I think Jamu said it and Professor Cooper, and Caroline said it about the need to, I call it, because in my feminist language, consciousness raising. That we need to talk to students. We're very focused on the minor, on my own reality and the thing that I have to contend with, which is surviving UA. And we have to get our students to understand that they have the victories that they will experience or the realities that they will win at are going to be experienced in collective action. We don't have collective action as an organizing principle. We have individualism. And so for me, it's the consciousness raising. These things that you're talking about that happened in the 1960s are inspiring and phenomenal, and we assume that students won't be interested in them. They will be. They will be. Since I've been talking to students at Seacole about Angela King and about who Seacolites are, and Lynette knows that's one of the things that I found so distressing, that the history of women on the campus has been so buried. And you have a hall of 200 and odd women who don't know that they have a history at this campus, or the student leadership who doesn't know that this is what student leadership came from, this phenomenal set of students in the 60s who fought, if you don't tell people their history, how are they going to be proud and know the possibilities that exist? We don't talk about these things. We just send people go exam. When students come in nowadays, you know what the lecturers tell them? 40% of you are going to fail, The other 20% are got their own C and so on. These are children, like young people like me, who are coming from free villages, who not quite so sure how they are going to navigate that space here. And the lecturers are telling them, you're going to fail. So.
Thank you very much. And in continuing the conversation, you know, the exhibition is there, which is trying to educate us. That's a start at the regional headquarters. I now hand you over to the organizers. Thank you very much. Give yourself a round of applause.